Hello again. This week, an artist and an activist. That's right. This week, I'm speaking with a photographer whose work crosses the boundaries somewhere between reality and fantasy, and always results in astounding creations. Whoa, so that was an interesting start. The massive fail of leaving the live stream sat open on your desktop at the same time. So back to it after that slightly interrupted beginning. This week's guest is Benjamin Von Wong. Benjamin's work lies, in his own words, at the intersection of fantasy and photography and combines everyday objects with effectively shocking statistics. His most recent work is a slight twist on that. It's attracted the attention of massive corporations like Starbucks, Dell, and Nike, and has generated over 100 million views for causes like ocean plastics, electronic waste, and fashion pollution. Most recently, Ben was named one of Adweek's 11 content branded masterminds. His work is nothing short of incredible, and he definitely does better at his introductions than I do. Please join me in welcoming Benjamin Von Wong to your screens.
Hello, how's it going?
Hey, that was good. Have you got any live streams playing that are going to start just like mine was? No.
So far, I don't think so. And I got headphones on just in case, so I'll be the only one.
That's good. Yeah, great. Nice. I'm glad to know it's all clear. How are you, Ben? It's good to see you.
Yeah, all things considered, this pandemic has been a wonderful blessing to slow down and to reconsider the meaning of life and spend time with family. So I have health and I have shelter, and so I consider myself to be very privileged.
That's a very good way of looking at it. So I have to confess, I'm not entirely sure what the state of play is where you are. You're in San Francisco, but are you allowed to move out and do things? Are you able to go and work again?
Actually, I escaped to Canada because the US is not the place to be right now. Canada, Montreal specifically, we're at gatherings of 250 people. Schools are reopening. Everything is essentially, quote unquote, back to normal for the most part, except major events and festivals and concerts are all canceled.
Okay.
So our second wave hasn't hit. We haven't been slapped in the back of the head like Australia, but I anticipate that to come at some point. So for now, everyone's just enjoying the summer while it's here, and it's worked out pretty well.
Okay, that's good. So
Yeah.
you've been taking the time really to come up with even more creations that befit you, shall we say, which I'm going to look forward to talking through
Yeah.
with you. But it's good to know that you're healthy and things are starting to kind of pick up. Each of these conversations that I have with people, you never quite know what they're going to say, to be perfectly honest. So,
Yeah, I mean, creativity has changed a little, like in its essence, for me. The work that I've done has always been in service of others. So I would create work for a cause. I would create work for a company. I would create work to educate or to inspire others. I haven't created for myself in a really long time, but being trapped at home and slowing down and having to think about why I do what I do has had sort of this opportunity to really think about, well, what do I want to create for me? And how can that be something of value? So I've fallen back into the process of creativity in a way that I haven't given myself the chance to, because you're just on that hamster wheel of saying, okay, I need to do the next project, I need to do the next project.
mhm.
And so it's been a different kind of busy. Like the very nature of the creations has changed.
Yeah, yeah. And would you say the first time you've been in this situation since your switch, really? I remember, I forget the year actually, but I remember a TED talk that you did where you sort of talked about how you switched your lifestyle and the way you did things. Do you think this has been the biggest gap since that switch?
I think it's been the biggest shift. So to give the listeners context, in 2012, I quit my day job as a hard rock mining engineer, and had worked 3.5 years and decided that I didn't want to be an engineer anymore. It's not that I wanted to be an artist. I just didn't want to be I didn't want to be an engineer. And so I wanted to travel, and photography was a way to travel for free. I could sleep on someone's sofa. I could teach a photography workshop. I could do some shoots, and that would just enable me to travel in perpetuity. And one thing led to the other. The career, that whole move ended up working out. And so, yeah, I essentially just stuck to it. But I think the first year was definitely just like, what do I want to do? Let's go and do it. As I was trying to climb the corporate ladder, I fell sort of in the, it's not really a trap, but just I started creating very intentionally, very calculatedly, and a lot less exploration and wandering for the sake of wandering, until I, built up my commercial portfolio, got some big commercial gigs, got a global campaign with Huawei, which ended up paying me more than my entire career combined at the time, in a single job, because global licensing does that. And I was just like, wow, this is not what I wanted to be doing. I mean, the money was great, but the idea that just getting paid to do what you do best wasn't actually enough for me. I needed something more.
Yeah.
And so I had a sort of career reconsideration too around 2015, 2016, where I started trying to add impact into the work that I was creating. And so I think that was also a period of wandering, but it was wandering in service of something else. So I was trying to figure out, how could I tie fantasy and impact together to create works that inspired not just the process, but also the end product. Like, how could both intricately tie together? And one thing went to another. I eventually moved down into experiences, building installations, because experiential was the place to be a year ago. And now it was like, boom, no more experiences, no more big brand projects. No one's taking big risks anymore. No one's doing random stuff, and no one's traveling. So my entire sort of roster of work sort of got put on ice, and I had to figure out who am I without my story? Who am I if what I create is no longer wanted or needed or necessary?
Yeah.
And what value can I continue to bring into the world? And if I can't plan what's going to happen in the next year or two, maybe I should start thinking about where I want to be 10 years from now. So I guess I am, I think, quite similarly close to when I quit my engineering job, in terms of like mental mind space of, I know what I don't want. I don't know what I want, but how can I line myself up for the next chapter?
Yeah. That's you've obviously done a lot of thinking, I'd say, in the last few months.
It's all you have time to do is think.
Exactly. Think and create. I mean, obviously you've started up your podcast, that we'll talk about. That plays into the stuff later on. But I think, of course, there's all this thinking that you've been doing and all the changes that have happened. But let's not run away from what you've achieved in the last, 8 years. It's nothing short of astounding, really. If you look at the huge projects and the traction that you gained from doing them, I think, I can't think of another artist really that was doing or has been doing something as impactful as you, and, if dare I say it, as brave and ballsy, really. To go and address the problem with the plastic straws, with plastic in the oceans, etc., it's a tricky one, and to try to make anyone sort of have any understanding of it, something physically constructed like you make, at least translates that message to people, and they can kind of understand what you're trying to say, or where the problem is. So I'd like to, if okay with you, I'd like to put up the first shot that we selected from your Strawpocalypse project, which was it was in Asia. Where was it? Was it Thailand?
Vietnam.
Vietnam, that was it. So here we have, uh, well, it's a crashing waves made of straws. If you haven't realised that as you watch this and you look at it, Ben, take us through this.
So yeah, that was a Guinness. I hear my voice.
Do you? Okay. Is that better?
All right.
Hopefully that's better. I've
Yeah,
got
there we
some.
go.
I've got some rogue noise outside.
No, good, no worries. So that was a Guinness World Record making art installation out of 168,000 plastic straws that were collected over the course of 9 months in Vietnam.
Oh.
I'd like to preface that I don't actually know how to build anything, and I'm just a guy who happens to be really good at convincing other people to do things that are really weird and dumb. And so I had this idea, or actually, the nonprofit reached out to me, Zero Waste Saigon, because they had seen some of my previous work I had done in, fashion waste and so forth, and just said like, hey, what would it take to get you to come down? And I was like, well, in order for me to come down and do something, I need to have access to material or to a space or to a story. Like, I need to have something unique that I can, like, I need to have a unique starting point, and then we can remix something and make it exciting. She's like, well, just tell me what you need. And I was like, I don't know. You're like a small nonprofit. What can you really do? And she's like, I can collect like anything. I was like, yeah, but can you collect a lot of anything? And she was like, yeah. Like, what do you give me an example? I was like, I don't know, like 100,000 plastic straws would be great. And she's like, I think I can do that.
Nice.
Okay. And then the next thing I said, well, just the material's not enough. Like, I need someone who's going to sponsor it. And she's like, oh, give me a couple weeks. Like, let me just announce that you're going to come, and I'll find the other pieces for you. And so they were really much the catalyst. So with every single project that I do, there's always one anchor human, like someone, an organization, a company, an individual who's just highly motivated. It doesn't actually matter like who that one person is, but there's always like one person that anchors the project, because just like in a film production, you need a fixer. This is the equivalent of my fixer that just happens to be like really involved and really knowledgeable. And so, because they were based out of Vietnam, they had the local community. They organized cleanups for 9 months across the entire country. And during that time, I was thinking of like, what would an interesting metaphor that was immediately understandable and relatable to people? What would that look like? And so, I just took a book out of the Bible, a page out of the Bible. We have the parting of the sea with Moses. Everyone knows it from every culture. Why not do the plastic sea? Because that's kind of what it's going to look like in about 50 years. We have more plastic than fish in the ocean. We hear all these statistics. It won't look like that. It'll look like invisible, because plastic breaks down in the ocean. Actually, I don't know if you guys have heard the latest statistic that they're finding plastic particles in rainwater. So it's basically getting so fine and so small that it's just like raining back down on us. Anyways. Never talk to an environmentalist. It's always depressing. But yeah, that was the project. So start to finish, like boots on the ground, was about a month. I landed there. We had the straws. We had nothing else. Built the team. Had 20 to 100 volunteers, come and help out and build this thing. We built it in a mall in real time, where people that were passing by would come and volunteer and help us like piece this thing together. I have to tell you, it's super stressful to like have a deadline, but not have like a paid team, because you never know how many people are going to show up the next day. There's all these people working for free, just to bring something together. But I think that's what makes the project special, because anything is possible if you have $1 zillion. But when you see a community come together to build something, that's when it becomes really interesting. So that's kind of what I try to do in every single project.
Yeah, well, I'm having looked at your sort of BTS of all the locals rallying around and sitting by this, appearing every day and sort of stitching straws together. I think obviously it had a resonance with the local community, because they see every day the problem that you are trying to highlight, and they want to try to do something about it. Building something obviously in a shopping mall is one thing, but then creating content around it that can go global is another. And obviously, you achieved that. You made the strong imagery off the back of effectively an art installation, which then was used and was hopefully seen by enough people. I feel that your content is strong enough to transmit that message and that problem. But you showed that by not having a zillion dollars, if you're doing something that people believe in, then they will come and help.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and I think the end result is stunning. Like, I've put it up on screen as we've been talking, and I just love the colors blowing through. The straw apocalypse. Where did that come from? Is that one of yours?
Oh, I just thought, yeah, cute word. I mean, it's just a play on words.
Of course,
Apocalypse and straw apocalypse is just funny. That's all. It's easy to remember. What
it
else would it
is.
be called? Like, I mean, I think technically we called the videos sort of like the parting of the plastic sea, which is nice and poetic. But straw apocalypse is just easier of a domain name to type in.
It is.
So always thinking about how can people discover it? How can they remember it? How can they type it? How can they find it? So that's why, like, every project that I create, there's a domain name associated to it. There's a hashtag. We think about all the pieces of the puzzle. And so while I might be a photographer, I'm also a creative director. I'm also the producer. I'm also the guy on the ground, like, wrangling volunteers. But then we also like edit a video, write out a blog post and do everything. So sort of like a one-man agency, just terribly unscalable, but very, very fun.
Yeah, I can see that. You can see that in all the videos that you make. You live for them. I think or not videos that you make, but the projects that you do. Rather, I'd say that you really do live for them. So the second one to put up is the plastic bottles with the mermaids.
Yeah.
You shared with me the teardrop shot, but obviously you've done a number of others. You've done the mermaid kind of struggling out of the ocean, lapping up on the shore. There was another one as well where you're face on, I think, shooting the mermaid. This one from above. This idea again, the idea with the straws. Did someone approach you, or was this one that you put in front of somebody?
My mom found a Mermaid Tail designer in Montreal while I was visiting for my sister's wedding, and I was here for a month, and so I had some time to kill. So I saw the Mermaid Tail, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. I want to do something with that. But it was at the time where I wanted it to associate to a cause. And so I was trying to figure out, like, well, what do mermaids have in common with saving the world? And this is back in 2016.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So right at the time where the Great Pacific Garbage Patch had just been discovered. And so I just thought of connecting the two together. And I was having a conversation with a friend, catching up with him, and he was saying that he wanted to get into production a little bit. And I'm like, oh, hey, do you want to try to find me, like, I don't know, 10,000 plastic bottles or something? It would be cool. And he's like, sure, let me give it a shot. On his second phone call to like a recycling company, they said, sure, like, we're more than happy to contribute our bottles. Where do you want them delivered? We can ship them to you in an 18-foot truck. And then I was like, whoa, 18-foot truck. I didn't realize 10,000 plastic bottles took up that much space. Where are we going to do this? And so then I started looking for a warehouse that, someone could do, and, someone whose wedding I had shot 6 years before. I like seem to recall that he had a flooring company, and so I just reached out and said, can I borrow a corner of your warehouse? And he said yes. And so, one thing led to another. After I had the warehouse, and I had to have the volunteers to clean the bottles, because the bottles showed up, and it was like, oh my gosh, there are so many bottles, and we need to clean, delabel, get through them. So it was just one thing at a time. I think when you have the hardest piece of the puzzle, in this case it was the bottles. Well, I guess you can either consider it like the concept. Concept is maybe the hardest part, but then once you had the concept, you had the bottles. Once you had the bottles, you had the warehouse. Once you had the warehouse, then you just need the people, and then each subsequent piece is sort of like a flywheel effect. Like, it becomes more and more attractive the more and more it becomes tangible. And I think very often people get caught up in well, I don't know where to start. But if you just get started, then the little pieces that you do have create like the the ladder rungs to slowly climb up eventually to get something done. For me, following my own advice has become increasingly harder because I no longer believe in just creating work for the sake of creating work because I have such a big portfolio. I don't actually need more work. What I'm curious about is having greater impact, but impact is actually quite complex because they require a lot of community components. So I think this was an example of one of my earlier projects that got me sort of on this environmental trend because it got 37 million views on Facebook when I launched it. And it was just one of those like, oh, Ben's an environmentalist now. So every time you do a project as an artist, it's weird. People like to put you in boxes. So you do a plastic project, now you're a plastic person. I do an underwater project, now I'm an underwater person. You do a fire project, you're a fire person. Like people just want to put you in boxes, and I think that's something that I've always kind of like struggled with. But yeah, the moral of the story is, with every project, you just have to like keep pulling on the threads until you eventually, leverage the pieces that you do have to find the ones that you don't. And sometimes you can just pretend that you have the hardest piece of the puzzle. You can say, oh, I already have access to, I don't know, whatever we do is going to be in this museum. And then you use that as the anchor, and then you go and you find the other pieces, and then you go to the museum with the whole package, and you're like, hey, I have this really cool opportunity for you guys. Of course, that comes with more risk, but I think just don't get defeated by, by the scale of the project. Always break them down into smaller parts.
Yeah, that's great advice, especially if you've got 10,000 plastic bottles landing in a warehouse. Then you've got to clean them before it even starts to make any logical sense. You said 37 million views. Did you expect that?
I think it's something you always hope for, but you never expect. And especially these days, the value of a view has gone down, and the ability to generate those views has also gone down. So not only are you working harder to gain something that is worth less, it's harder to guarantee. So
true, very true. Yeah.
Increasingly for me over time, views have become less and less of a metric of success because algorithms are not designed to support the kind of work that I create. Not anymore. It used to be a point in time where if you did something that was weird and different enough, it would get coverage, and that coverage would lead to visibility, and that visibility would kind of spread. These days, the way you get visibility is by being extremely consistent, regular, doing just about the same thing slightly differently, over and over and over again. And then you build up sort of like a YouTube following or something like that, or an Instagram following or a TikTok following. Like it's about consistency and regularity. But what I do is all about like unique, big moments in time. And so I think there's a danger to that. I don't think that, just from a pure like creativity standpoint. So it works for some people, but the danger is you are no longer a person. You are a character that people subscribe to. And the day you want to change because you are inspired by something else, or you are no longer, let's say you shoot lifestyle, but now you want to start traveling a little bit more, but now you want to start doing a bit more architecture, or you want to change your pace of life. Like you're not allowed to change, because you as a brand are not allowed to change. You're a brand now. You're your character. And so I actually think that you get short-term gains. I don't know if you get long-term gains. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why you have like an epidemic of depressed creatives, because they're just driven by like creation, and that creation is driven by the desire for consumption, and consumption is insatiable. People who consume will never be satisfied, so it'll never be enough, and that's what you're trying to fill. And I just don't see it as the right thing to pursue. I don't necessarily see it as sustainable.
No, I mean, interestingly, you're right. There's so many people doing it now. We said it just before we got on the call. I mean, everyone's used to sort of having engaging conversations or watching YouTubers doing something in light of the last 6 months, more so than any other time. But there's also so much out there. That's kind of what you watch, what you break through. I mean, interesting you say about regularity and consistency. Yes, I've heard that, and that's definitely something that a lot of people refer to. But then, you have been regular, you have been consistent in creating interesting stuff. You've also been creating content that's completely different. So,
Yep, the algorithms don't care about that.
no.
So my point is, humans aren't making decisions anymore. But they're not making the decisions on what they look at or what they decide to feature. It's sort of because the popularity feeds itself, right? If something is deemed as popular, then it becomes more popular by virtue of it being popular in the first place.
Of course.
That's why celebrities get a lot of airtime, even though they don't say anything interesting, as an example. So in that sense, like, the algorithms are really driving everything, and no one is controlling them. No one even knows how it works exactly, because it's constantly being changed. And so you, as a creator who's chasing an algorithm in order to survive, is actually chasing something that nobody actually understands, that doesn't have your best interests at heart. It's really there to make people feel addicted to a product. So I don't know. This isn't really to say that there is a solution to it. Like, I mean, I have sort of the way I've adapted to it, but I point it out as sort of something to keep in mind as you aspire to be a creator, is to not forget why you're creating in the first place. And,
Absolutely.
And to be sure that you are creating because it's something that you truly enjoy to do.
And believe in.
I think there's a danger. There's a danger in, for example, like, you can talk to any creator and they're going to always have a zillion streams of income. But their zillion streams of income are going to depend on their brand and that pillar. So if they decide to change that brand, then everything kind of falls through. So, you can't have. So I've always been very careful of not being successful doing something I didn't enjoy doing. So I've refused to basically build courses because I don't want to be a teacher. Even though it would have been like a wonderful revenue stream, but I didn't want like my lifestyle to grow at the same pace. Like, because you spend what you have. So the more money you earn, the more you spend. And so it's much better to earn less, even if the money is available, at the risk of getting trapped doing something you don't actually want to be doing. Like, do you really want to be spending your time putting together AdSense, writing newsletters, or do you want to be out there like creating and crafting things? So how can you create the life so that you can do the things that matter to you? And how can you hold on to enough flexibility so that you can continue to have agency over what you actually choose to do? I think those are the bigger and more important questions to always keep in mind.
Well said. Well, obviously, there's something you've been considering for the last few months.
Doing a lot of thinking on it. But I'm always thinking about this kind of stuff.
Well, you have to, actually. Interestingly, as an artist, as a creator, right now, that's exactly what we have to do to try to gain some traction, gain interest, create some revenue. Whether it's making art, making content, doing a shoot, or coming up with some clever marketing campaign. We're all doing it, aren't we? Really, at the end of the day, that's why we're having this conversation here now. I'm doing my bit, and you're doing your bit. Really,
planting seeds. You never know where these seeds lie.
No, exactly. Well, look, a seed that you planted was a laptop, and that sprouted into a massive flower of them. What this one to put up on the screen is. This is where you start to sort of head into your kind of, not Mad Max, because that's another sort of series, but this is, what would you say, kind of futuristic vibe, almost.
Yeah. So that specific laptop image was actually inspired by the opening scene of 2049 Blade Runner. I don't know if you remember the solar fields that are kind of like all wrapped around. It's the exact same pattern, but I had to figure out how to do it with chalk and piece of string, which turns out is really possible. It's just math. And so that was created for Dell. Dell has the largest electronic waste recycling program in the world, but nobody knows about it. And so the interesting thing about companies is, while they may say that they're creative, nobody wants to take a risk for something they've never seen before.
No,
and so I met Dell on a panel that I spoke at, because they had seen my plastic bottle thing. And so someone came up to me and was like, hey, do you think you could do the same thing with electronic waste? And so I think it's really important to put out work for which you want to be hired for. If you're not putting out work that shows the kind of thing that you want to do, no one's going to ever hire you to do it. Like, you need to prove that you're capable of doing it alone before anyone's going to come and take a risk on you. So I think that's like one really important thing. The other is with these projects, or this project specifically, they set a couple brand guidelines. So they wanted it to be positive, they wanted it to be futuristic, they wanted it to be cool, and appeal to a younger crowd. So that was kind of the byproduct of what came up. So it was just about thinking of how do you make something that is fairly limited. So you try to absorb all the design constraints and then output something that does it justice. And it's the same sort of flow, right? We still had volunteers come in to be a part of the project.
Yeah.
And the reason I like to have volunteers is because ultimately, I think everyone gets something out of it. The volunteers get a chance to be part of a big commercial project, which is really rare. I mean, actually, I had to fight for that because nobody wants the liability of a bunch of volunteers running around.
Yeah.
But it was so important to me to like open up that opportunity for anyone who wanted to come and have fun. And then we could hire, we hired a couple like builders and stuff like that, for all the technical stuff. But yeah, that's sort of the way it is. And when I was hired to do this, it's the same thing. It's let's come up with a concept, let's come up with photo, let's come up with actual video that explains what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it. Let's talk about the values. And I think for a company like Dell, what they got out of it was, is very unexpected. They thought it as like a front-facing campaign for customers to look at. But, when they circulated internally inside of their newsletters, it was like it had a really big impact because their employees were finally able to like show something to their family or their kids that they would understand and be like, hey, look, this is the company I'm working for, and these are kind of the things that we do and the things that we value. So it's an opportunity to strike up conversations that you wouldn't normally have. And I think that's really what art is about, right? Art is about helping people shift their perspectives of the world, to discover things, to be curious, to explore new topics. And if you're not doing that, then the art is just going to be like, swipe and continue. So you need people to stop and think and wonder and be curious. Like that I think is where the power lies.
True, but you also need the company to want to make something to engage in that capacity. Now, obviously, Dell's done that.
Yes.
There has obviously been a bit of a change in recent years, possibly months, maybe a bit too short term, but there's definitely a change in approach by companies. But do you think it's enough and we're seeing enough of it? Have you had any other sort of thoughts around that? Dell did it, but not everyone is doing it.
I think that if we look at things from, let's say, like the 2030 climate goals or the 2050 climate goals, and we look at what's to come, and we look at the rate at which change happens, nothing is enough. But I don't do the work that I do because I think we're going to win the war. I just do it because I think we have to fight the battles. And
Absolutely.
This is the only way that I know how to fight. And I think you fight by finding allies and holding up a torch to tell people that this is another way forward, and we need, and it can be done in an interesting way, and it can be engaging, it can be different, it can be fun, and people actually care about it. And so, do I think it's enough? Absolutely not. But do I know what else can be done? I'm not too sure. So, I mean, that's part of I think a lot of the questions that I'm asking these days. So there are 1 billion creative entrepreneurs in the world right now, that are, working in some capacity, but most of them are focused on creating widgets, like creating a graphic or a photo or a thing that someone can buy and someone can transact and sell. And so you're taking the secret piece of the puzzle that closes the gap between the heart and the mind, that affects people's abilities to make good decisions in their lives, and you're reducing that to a widget that a company can buy and transact. And so the entire potential of art has been sort of bastardized into entertainment and marketing and fine art, the three categories. And it's because we are valuing art based on the output, not on the outcomes, right?
Yeah.
Why is art not valued based on the lives that it's changed or affected or transformed? The reason is because it's really hard to measure. And so, I think a really great analogy to think about is that if you were to measure the amount you loved your wife based on the number of dollars that you guys transacted between each other, or quantify it by the amount of hugs you give her per day. I mean, it's the wrong metric. And we have all these KPIs for art that are just completely irrelevant. And I think that needs to change because there are so many problems in the world that we know how to solve that we aren't solving because we don't have the willpower. And where do you get the willpower from? You get the willpower from creating amazing narratives, great stories, shifts of perspective. But in order to do that, the incentive needs to be there. People can't just do this on the evenings and weekends. They need to be able to make careers out of it. So what does it look like to be an artist who has a power of narrative for the betterment of humanity? What does that business model look like? How are they going to survive? How do they sell the value of the services they can provide, right? How can we create that market? And so that's the bigger opportunity, I think, today, and the one that I'm trying to understand and break down in hopes that it creates an entirely new industry. Because just doing like the side marketing projects and setting your own ethical boundaries is not going to get us anywhere.
No, true. And I think, you talk about creating widgets. Effectively, people do that to drive the economy, and they are doing that for lining their pockets, or funding their lifestyle, whatever it may be. There hopefully will be a turning point. But it's a long way away. People are too used to trying to work on in bettering the economy or helping themselves to a better life. And the problem with a lot of the marketing that comes from companies everyone out there, is they're always trying to put more products in front of us. And when those products are finished, then they end up somewhere. Now, obviously, Dell is showing what they've done, or what they do with the products once they're done with. But not everyone is doing that. There has been a push in this sort of outdoor industry about making sneakers from disposed plastic bottles from the oceans and things of that sort. So people start to kind of understand that, but obviously it's minute in comparison. And that industry needs to scale up massively to re-affect the balance. Maybe more campaigns like this from Dell and other similar ones that you've done are the ticket, are trying to get people to understand it. But then the issue is you put too much of that in front of people's faces and they turn a blind eye after a while. So
I think what we need is it's a paradigm shift of what is expected. And I think that means that things have to get worse before they're going to get better. A billion people are going to be displaced in the next 30 to 50 years because of the global sea level rises. And we saw what 3 million people going into Europe did. So there's no way that things are going to continue. Now, what happens between now and then is a question mark on how it's going to unfold. And we'll see.
Well said. Yeah, I think we will see. So look, something slightly different. Well, I've got your underwater shot. Do you want to give it 2 minutes on that before I show the gravity-defying stunt that you pulled?
Sure. The underwater shot was, while I was exploring in 2016, like how to tie fantasy and impact together,
Boom, boom.
I was invited to teach a workshop in Fiji, and it was like, hey, come, and I was like, well, what is there to do in Fiji? And I started asking around, and it turns out there were good shark dives. And so I started, Googling like what problems sharks had. And of course, we got shark fin soup and the
Yeah.
100 million sharks that are killed every single year. And so I was like, okay, well, how might we create a conversation around this? And so, you do what everyone else would think to do, which is tie a model underwater with sharks swimming around,
Of
to prove that
course.
sharks aren't really dangerous. Like, yeah, why not? I mean, I had already tied models underwater before, so I knew how to
Yeah.
shoot them
Yeah. Yeah.
underwater, take photos of them. But I had never done it with sharks, and so it just seemed like a logical next step. Turns out it's really, really difficult to shoot underwater creatures because you can't. There's like no way to pose them or attract them, or like it's just you just have a lot of waiting to do. But anyways, we spent like 5 days in the water, and we managed to do this series. Got 80,000 petition signatures for shark sanctuaries to be created in Malaysia, and so on and so forth. So it was an interesting campaign. No one paid for it. I self-funded it, and then found a nonprofit to push it because nobody wanted to take the risk and liability as usual.
Yes, of course. Well, this is all the type of thing we've been talking about. Is companies willing to move down those avenues? So, I mean, that's effectively interesting to see the difference there between the Dell shot and that shot. Obviously, Dell wanted to push it, but a lot of other companies are scared to. But that is good. I mean, this is a great little project. I saw on your site that you've stuck across it. These are real sharks. They're not photoshopped. Um, I love it because obviously, I think average person would think that they were photoshopped unless they knew quite what you get up to. So, look, talking about getting up to doing something a bit different. This shot you did, the series you did for Nike.
Yeah.
Where you're literally hanging off buildings. We've only got one of these shots to show, although I know that there are a few more. And you've also done a sort of series slightly akin to that with sort of Marvel type characters, superhero type things. But this one, for those of you at home, Ben isn't leaning out of a window here. Ben is actually hanging in a harness, upside down. I'm not sure how many floors up this is. It looks a long way. But Ben is actually hanging upside down doing this himself. So he's not leaning out of a window. He's slung on a rope just like this runner.
Yeah, you can't ask people to do things you're not going to do yourself. That would be terrible. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
you got to do it too. It's we're hanging off a car winch, so it was totally safe. From a load capacity, I think it was totally fine, and we had safety lines and everything. Nike reached out and they wanted me to promote their shoes, and I was like, I can't do something without impact, so let's figure out a way to add impact to it. And the solution we came up with was to highlight social entrepreneurs that were doing good within their own communities, trying to highlight whatever they were doing. And so we basically nixed all the influencers that they had planned and featured local community members because that was just the better story, and it was stronger and it was just more interesting, and that resulted in a couple shots. One of the one being the ones up on screen, another one being I think we ended up hanging a bicycle off because there was this guy who was creating sustainable bamboo bicycles. So who hangs a bicycle off a building? Well, it's a great reason to do it.
Why not?
I think the basic premise once again was just let's shift perspectives, let's show something that can't be done, but let's see people in a different light, right? They wanted to do it to promote how light their shoes were, but I wanted to do it because I wanted to show how the new generation of leaders were going to be coming up. And so I think there's always a great compromise, and compromise isn't necessarily a good word because there's just there are better stories out there. And I think it's about not being lazy and just saying oh, sure, let's do it. I mean, adding impact is adding another constraint. So it's never going to be easier.
Of course.
But the byproduct of adding a new constraint is that it becomes better. And so how are you going to help your clients create better, more meaningful, more relevant work out there? And, there's this sort of, I think, misnomer that when you do things with impact, you're adding risk into the equation. But what you're actually doing is you're creating something that's more evergreen. Because if you're going to be talking about things that need to be consistently worked on and solved, then they're going to last longer. It's not just going to be a stunt that people see and then forget about. It's going to be something that comes up over and over again because it speaks to people's current thoughts and the change that needs to happen. And so the work that I've created within the sustainability space, like these are things that are still coming up. I mean, this year, the United Nations converted one of my mermaid photos into a stamp. And this is a project that's over 4 years old, and it's still coming back. And it's coming back because the issue is only growing. So the work, in essence, is evergreen. And so I really think that, people need to start paying attention to the things that matter and the things that need solving and the things that need representation. Because if you do work and you do it that is good and you do it in a way that resonates with people, it's actually something that can really tremendously help your career. So it's not just selfless. It's also, it's selfish, but selfish in the sense that, we all want to protect the world that we want to live in, regardless of that, social issues, environmental issues, justice issues. It doesn't matter what you care about. Start speaking about it, and I guarantee you, it will be relevant. And oftentimes, we, as artists, we have inflated egos, and so we think that our things should be seen more because we think they're good. Maybe they're just not good enough yet. And just keep, you have to keep working on it and keep working on it and keep believing in it. But also, yes, think about how it's going to be seen by the world. Think about the marketing too. But don't feel entitled to the visibility. Don't feel entitled to getting work out of it. Continuously work on improving. And it's just like climbing a mountain. If you keep putting one step in front of the other, you're eventually going to get up there. So.
Of course, yeah. It's very true. Much like this girl that's running across. she eventually,
one step in front of the other.
Exactly. She eventually got there. Well, look, I mean, the work that you've done obviously has a lot of impact, and you've done a lot of it for that purpose, as we've talked about. But take yourself away from the wider world and put yourself in a house without being able to go out, and you manage to create some impossible images as well. You started really on a slightly side tangent, side project, which you've entitled Mini Worlds, and we're going to show a number of those from your maternity series, Impossible Maternity Series for your sister, as well as a couple of them that play into your podcast. But I have to ask really here, the inspiration behind this. Were you into kind of mini theatres as a little child, or where did this sort of flash come from?
Oh, it's my mom again. Take pictures of your sister. She's pregnant. And I was like, okay, but okay, fine. We can just go out into the park and take pictures, and that would be fine and boring. So that was sort of in the schedule, but we hadn't really made any plans. And then my mom started seeing, she was just like, oh, why don't we use fruits and vegetables to create a little world, and maybe she was just creating a world that had nothing to do with the photo shoot. And so, and my mom is not a creative person, by the way. She is not an artist. She's just cooking. And she started noticing that these things looked like buildings, and then I guess that was the seed of the idea that then just grew. And we're like, I'm not a very crafty person, so we just took pictures that we then cut out into little silhouettes and crafted these entire worlds. So, the byproduct of this series, which is kind of interesting, I'd been wanting to screw around with TikTok for a little while just to see what the craze was about, but never had a good reason to do it. And so I created this 5-part series that was optimized for TikTok. And we ended up I got 100,000 followers out of this 5-part series, and I haven't posted since. 130,000 followers. So now I'm a TikTok influencer, thanks to these maternity videos.
Incredible. Made from bananas and icing sugar.
Yeah.
So you originally you put all this stuff up on TikTok, but you shot all this in your mum's house, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm here now. When COVID hit, I had nowhere to go because I was nomadic. I got rid of my place in San Francisco, and I was like, where do I go? So I'm back in the room that I went to university in. at 33 years old. But it's pretty cool. I have to say that, I was reading a comic by the folks, they're called Wait But Why. And it said that if you left your house at 18 years old to live alone, then you've likely used up 93% of your family time. You only had 7% left until the end of your life. And I was like, oh, this is actually an opportunity to spend a little bit more time at home. And, while initially I think there was definitely some pride issues where it's always weird to be living with your parents, I realized that it's actually a choice, because if I wanted to leave, I could leave. And so why not think about all the opportunities that I have, like creating this family series. But also now I'm an uncle. My sister gave birth 2 months ago, so there's a little human running around. I'm doing exercise with my dad. We're going on little family trips. And how many people get the opportunity to like reconnect with their parents at like 33 years old, like not because of some major like life-threatening urgency or something, like literally just being able to like come back here and spend some time together. So, so much of it is about perspective, right? On one hand, you can be like, oh, I'm a like 33-year-old unemployed dude living at home with my parents. This was not the plan. Life sucks. Or you could just be like, hey, I get to like be here and watch my nephew kind of emerge and grow up and spend some more time with family.
And be
for a year. Not that bad.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, you're obviously taking a lot of influence from that time. Your mum's creativity using sweet corns and goodness knows what else to bananas to create worlds has done a lot. It's done a lot to create some pretty amazing work, really. So, if anything, you've validated your reasons for going home in a big way. But these mini worlds, which are kind of the second level of the fruit and vegetable story, shall we say, the one that you have sat next to you, where did this come from? Because these are now sort of these are what you use for the art for your podcast.
Oh, my little dioramas.
This is it. Yeah,
those are. I guess they kind of. I guess in some ways they're definitely a byproduct of the mini world series, because I was creating these little miniature worlds out of fruits and vegetables, and I find them quite time consuming. And then you have to play with fruits and vegetables for hours, and it's messy, and I couldn't do very much else. But on the side, I was doing a podcast, and the reason I started a podcast is because I wanted. So it's important to surround yourself with the things that inspire you, and in a time where you are losing out on serendipity because you're trapped at home, you have to manufacture your own serendipity. And the podcast for me represented that. I care about impact, and I get inspired when I talk to people who are changing the world. And so how better to keep myself accountable to talk to people who are changing the world so that I can stay inspired by building a podcast around it and just recording them and editing them and pulling out the most memorable quotes so that I can learn from them and share that journey with everyone else, right? So the podcast as a framework to stay inspired was really, really important. So I started that, was doing it once a week. And I've had, tremendously cool people on it, from, human trafficking survivors to NASA scientists to youth activists to Oscar-winning filmmakers. Wow. To like mentors and coaches, and so like the range is really broad, and so it's called Impact Everywhere, which it tries to explore positive impact in unexpected places. And originally it started with this question of like, how might we more effectively measure the impact of art? Because if we can measure the impact of art, then we can sell the impact of art, and if we can sell the impact of art, then people can have careers out of it. And then I realized maybe by episode 18 that maybe I was asking the wrong question, because any attempt at measuring impact of art would be a bastardization of the art itself. And so now I'm starting to shift that, and I'm actually curious to talk to people who have shifted paradigms. Like, who are people who shifted the existing paradigms of what is normal? So I think of someone like Muhammad Yunus, who has successfully shifted the microfinancing industry, changing the fundamental belief that poor people wouldn't be accountable and pay their loans back. And he invented a new model that made it possible. And so, I'm interested in talking to people like this and to understand how story and narrative and art played a role in influencing these things. because maybe then I could emerge a blueprint. And so the podcast becomes this container for me to do that. And around that, I started to realize, well, you create a podcast and it's freaking impossible to promote a podcast. But the great thing is it doesn't truly matter how many views I get because I'm creating it for myself. But then you pour your heart and soul into creating something that's really good and you want people to listen to it. So you kind of have a little bit of attention. Yeah. Anyways, I need to figure out how to create the marketing material around it. And initially, if you go back to like my first 6 or 7 episodes, like there's like no marketing around it. It's terrible. It's just like a little like medium write-up that has like no visuals. And after the Mini World series, I discovered that there's a printer that can print with a blade, and so it actually like cuts out patterns. So think of a laser cutter, but it's a lot cheaper. It's like $200. And so I started creating these dioramas. I think one's on screen, but like this one's gonna be, I don't know if you have this, but this one's gonna be coming out in a couple weeks. And so like they're just layers of paper, and then I'll put like little backlights behind them. This top thing is going to be red, so I have some like hue lights. So I'm using like super basic fairy lights, just these like little like string lights to light these things up. So I have these $10,000 Broncolor lights that are just sitting in a closet. But what I do have is fairy lights that I bought on Amazon to illuminate my little microscopic series, and it's just been really, really fun. Like, to have control over your own creativity is something that like I haven't had in a really long time, because photography is collaborative, right? Like you need to bring people together to shoot something. And if you don't bring them together, then you have nothing to shoot. I mean, unless you're like architecture or landscape or whatever, which I'm not. And so this is like the first time where I can just sit at home, come up with an idea and build it. And so I taught myself how to use Illustrator. I taught myself how to think in like planar 2 dimensions. And who knows, maybe one day this could be 10-story tall pieces of installations. Maybe this will be something else. I don't know yet. But maybe it doesn't matter, right? And just to have that curiosity again, I think is something really important to retain. So and I think you find that by looking for opportunity as opposed to like bemoaning circumstances.
Of course. Yeah. I've said this all the way through, actually, the talks that I've done. This is the 19th one, I think. So similar amount to your podcast. Everyone's talked about it. This is a time for creativity, and it's a time where you discover and find new things and new ideas. And I myself am also the same. I have my traffic lights set here. So this is
installations.
traffic lights. So there's a set of images. It's really, you can see with my black t-shirt. There's a set of images that are all lit by traffic lights, which will go in those. And cool. So, like you, I've kind of got a few creative things going on. But your dioramas, how many of those have you got now? Have you got separate frames for every single one?
I tear them down after each one.
Give
me a second. So essentially, I have this book now of just like all these little dioramas that I've created.
Amazing.
So they don't look as cool, but it's just fun to keep like a physical track of it. It's like a scrapbook nowadays. So
it is, yeah.
Kind of cute.
I feel that when you're, if you ever feel that you're done, you could buy a number of those frames and create an amazing installation just with all of them together.
I guess I could.
If it gets that far.
That cheap. They're like $20 or so. So I just reuse them and recycle them. I just empty them out every week, and it's totally fine. So, there's I was considering like starting a Patreon or something, and then doing like a raffle every week where people could win it. But then I just once again I thought about the logistical cost of that, and having to make something and ship it, and ensure that the lighting was shippable and ready. And I was just like, no, that's not why I'm doing this. Like, the reason I'm doing this is because I need to learn and I need to absorb knowledge, and so I give myself homework. And of late, I think what that's going to look like in the near future is I'm going to start writing again. I'm going to learn how to write, like create a newsletter that focuses on frameworks and the polling of different pieces of knowledge, and it's something I've always avoided, but now I have time to do that. So
Indeed.
yeah,
Gosh, well, you
lots of
can
homework.
add that to your amazing quiver then of skills that you've taken on in these last few months.
Well, for me, I'm trying to. So it doesn't matter how successful you become as an artist, you'll only be one person. So the amount of change you can affect through each project will always be capped. And I think that the life cycle of an artist, which is codependent on marketing, means that you can never quite expand beyond that container. Um, and so what I find interesting is actually starting to outsource your brain, because if you can sort of shift between artist and consultant, not to like sacrifice the artist, but to like shift into consulting, well, what that allows you to do is to put your brain to work all the time in between projects, right? So it would, if the creative cycle is like feast or famine, um, thinking can occupy the whole famine portion of it and convert that into more feast. And so I think one of the things that I'd always neglected to do, now that I'm looking back and retrospecting on my life, is that I've only always talked about the end result of what I create. I don't talk about the bottom of iceberg, which is the months of planning and preparing and conceptualizing and the sketches that go in between in order to get to the final result. Like, what were all the ideas that didn't happen in order to make this one happen?
Yeah.
And because that's where the value happens, but that's never what a client is willing to pay for. And I don't think it's because a client doesn't want to pay for it, is that they actually don't know it exists. And so what you do by bringing the process to the forefront and the thinking and the thought leadership around it is you make it visible. And so then if it's visible, you can now charge for it. And so I'm not doing this in the sense that I'm intentionally hoping to become like a full-time consultant, but I do think it's important to take a lot of what is going on passively in the background, in the shadows, and surface that. And I think each one of us is an iceberg of potential, where, you know, the world only sees a tip of it, and there's all this stuff that goes on the bottom that nobody else knows about. And if we just like start like levitating out of the water, and then suddenly, you know, the amount of things people can tap you for is increased, because they know that you can do all this stuff now that they wouldn't have known otherwise. So I think you need to like play with that iceberg.
Yeah, I like that. That's a really amazing analogy, actually, and very befitting
I
to
stole
you.
it from one of my podcast guests, episode 14. Gary Bull's chair for the future of work of Singularity University talks about it from an organizational perspective. Yeah, I have some amazing guests that have come on board who just, you know, and it's all these like little nuggets that you can then regurgitate now that you know them.
Exactly.
Really, really cool.
I love it. Well, I'm going to use that one as well myself. So here we go.
Yeah,
It's
please
the
do.
third one.
The
So
idea, right? If you spread the knowledge and the love, like the pie becomes bigger. You're not like taking anyone else's pie. The pie becomes bigger for all.
exactly, yeah. We all improve and learn every day.
Yeah.
So Ben, look, we've hit our hour. It's been super inspirational to talk to you. Like we could clearly go on for a lot longer, and regardless of showing some of your work, you know, talk about what you've got up your sleeve. Maybe that's an episode 2 that we should consider doing. To kind of see where you go with some more mini worlds, and what other things come up, and what other ideas come out from the next sort of, well, however many months you're going to be at your mum's house. But look, for now, I'm going to call it a day and say thanks very much.
Yep.
It's been a total pleasure having you on. It's been really
Thanks for
nice to
having
see
me,
your
Ben.
face again and see that you're healthy and keeping ridiculously creative.
Likewise. Thanks for taking the time to put on a show like this. I'm sure people really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, well, thanks very much for agreeing to be one of the people on it. Stay there, and I
There's
will.
nowhere else to go.
Yeah, and I'll come back to you as soon as I've said goodbye to everyone here. So thanks very much again for joining us. So there we go. Amazing guest. Really a fountain of creativity, an iceberg of potential, shall we say. I love that phrase. Really cool. Ben is definitely one to follow. Go check out his Impact Everywhere podcast, which you can find on medium.com. and go to vonwong.com to go and see any one of his projects, videos, and see what he's really getting up to. He's truly a source of creativity, and long may his art have an impact everywhere around us. For now, thanks very much for joining. Do come again next week, and we'll see you then. But for now, go check out charliepinphoto.co.uk to buy yourself some art for your walls. Bye for now.